Welcome to the Spectrum Lounge podcast, where we discuss creatives of color disrupting the game in TV, film, and pop culture. I am your host, Rebecca Theodore-Vachon, and on this episode, I am joined by Robert Young as we discuss episode 3 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, titled The Power Broker. The Power Broker. Take a listen. Hey, Robert. I'm just like tongue
Hi.
tied today. Hey, week 3. Week
Week
3.
3, a banging episode. Really looking
Wow.
forward to this.
Oh man. So I was talking to a friend of mine and I was just like, we've been having so much fun doing these recaps. And I was like, yeah, this is sort of like a podcast marriage. Like Robert is like my podcast husband. But I think we're about
Uh,
I think we might be having our first argument though. But
uh-oh.
well,
Uh-oh.
no, there were things that I liked about episode 3 and there were
hmm
a couple of things that I have a question mark. Not I didn't hate it. There were just
Right.
a couple of questions I have.
Okay.
But anyway, yes, episode 3 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier is now streaming on Disney Plus. And so I just wanted to get your initial thoughts. What did you think of episode 3?
I really, really enjoyed Zemo in this
Mm-hmm.
episode. Like,
Yes.
I wasn't really looking forward to um seeing him come back because I didn't really know how they were going to use him.
Mm-hmm.
But the way he is used in this episode to kind of propel them forward, to try to find the answers to their question is quite awesome. Like he really fits in with those two surprisingly well.
So we know that at the end of episode 2, when we left Sam and Bucky, because they realized that the super serum had been recreated. And so Bucky was like, this is their assumption that Hydra is behind this. So Bucky's logic is, who knows anyone, the only person who knows more about Hydra than me is Zemo. And we know this from Civil War when, going back from Winter Soldier, at the end of Winter Soldier, when Black Widow had done that whole info dump, so to
hmm
speak,
Yeah.
when S.H.I.E.L.D. was compromised. And she was like, well, I'm airing out everybody, S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, everybody. And so we know that Zemo, whose family had been murdered in Age of Ultron in Sokovia with that horrible, the fight between the Avengers and Ultron, his family, I believe his wife, his children, and his father were murdered. And
Right.
so in Civil War, he was basically on this uh, path of revenge, where he successfully dismantled the Avengers. No powers, just receipts and facts. And so with that info dump, we know that Zemo is someone who is very methodical. He's very intelligent, and so he really took his time going through all of those Hydra files. So he's basically like a Hydra expert now.
Yeah.
So the beginning of the episode, Sam and Bucky decide to visit Zemo in prison, and Bucky basically says, I'm gonna go talk to him because Sam wanted to go, and Bucky was like, no, you're an Avenger. He doesn't want to talk to you. Any superpowered, anybody with costumes, he doesn't want to talk to you. He'll talk to me. And so he decides to get some information from Zemo. And from there, Bucky comes up with a decision to break Zemo out of jail because he feels like he's the only one that can. Oh, Lord. Okay. So what did you think of that storyline? What did you think of that?
Well, first thing I thought is like as soon as he opened the door, Zemo was all on the mind games again. Like he
Mm-hmm.
immediately went at Bucky with the mind games. Like he had
Yes.
been waiting all these years to continue torturing these guys.
Yeah.
Um the whole breaking out of prison thing. I mean, I do like the kind of the way he told the story to Sam and they simultaneously
Hypothetically.
yeah, the hypothetical story while they cut in with the actual, footage of Zemo taking this plan
Mm-hmm.
and executing it.
Right.
So I did like that. I mean, is it the most realistic thing? No, not really. But was it cool to see, him explaining it to Sam while Sam knows in the back of his head that he actually did this?
Right.
and then seeing it at the same time, I enjoyed that. What
Right.
about you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we knew that they had to break Zemo out, like, because he's basically, well, it's the verdict is still out if Zemo is the ultimate bad in this series. Because as we're realizing, a lot of people have agendas. People are not who they seem to be. That seemed to be a recurrent theme in episode 3, is that people are really not who you think they are.
Right.
Like Zemo, for instance, right? Like when we were introduced to him in Civil War, we knew that he was like this brilliant tactical soldier. I think he worked in Black Ops, right?
Yeah, he was an
And
intel guy.
yeah, he was an intel, and we knew that he was just dropping bodies. And now we come to find out in this episode that he's like this billionaire. He's like this wealthy. He's Baron Zemo, which
Yeah,
is
he's an
from the
actual
comics.
Baron.
He's an actual Baron, because when they decide to go, they go into this garage with all these, vintage antique cars. And Zemo's like, "Oh yeah, these are all mine." And he was like, "You didn't know this, but yeah, I'm rich." You know what I mean? So it's just like, and then they drive to to a field, and he has his own plane. And Zemo basically says, that if we're looking for who recreated that super soldier serum, we have to go to Madripoor. I think did he say it was off Indonesia, or I forget,
Yeah,
it's
it's
somewhere
between, like, Indonesia and Singapore, I think
in
it's in that
Singapore.
area.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say this. I mean, we'll get into more details of this episode. Now, two things. In this episode, I did feel that Sam kind of took a back seat in this episode. It was more like Bucky and Zemo were running the show, so to speak. Um,
I agree with that.
yeah, but here's the thing though. I think I could be, I mean, I would have to speak to the writers and the showrunner to see if this was their plan. But I was just looking at this episode and I was like, see, Bucky, and this is why Cap did not give you the damn shield. Because it was just a series of bad and stupid decisions. You know what I
It
mean?
really was.
Oh
It
my
really
God.
was.
Cause Sam was just, pushing back. Like initially when, Sam, when Bucky proposes breaking Zemo out of jail, Sam was like, "Oh, hello. Just wanted to remind you that this man killed the king of Wakanda. He killed T'Challa's father. He killed T'Chaka. He pretended to be Bucky, blew up, the World Council building. This is when they were about to sign the Sokovia Accords, and started all of this. That of course that was part of his whole master plan to break up the Avengers. But and then Sam says something. He was like, "Listen, you may think that other people have forgotten, but the Wakandans didn't forget that.
Mhm.
They did not forget that this man, that Zemo, has killed this king." So yes, while it was cool to see all the glamour and like sort of like he's sort of like this international spy, Zemo.
Mhm.
There's some very real world consequences and some real world actions that Zemo had made, right? And so it's
I
like, yeah,
agree.
yeah.
And one of the things we see throughout that entire episode is, like,
Mhm.
he's really fixated on Bucky. Like,
Yes.
in certain ones of those scenes, he's like, when Bucky's like, "That's not in me anymore," and he's like, "Are you sure about that?"
He's got something
And
up his sleeve.
yeah, when they meet, when they meet up with that woman a little bit later, and he's kind of like running his hands along Bucky's face and telling him, he's really treating him like the Winter Soldier, and he's
Yes.
like almost like he's like poking him just to see how far he can push him.
Yes. That kind of reminded me of a little bit. I This week I decided to revisit some of the MCU movies, so I went back and watched First Avenger, and then I watched the Avengers, right? The
Mhm.
first team up of the Avengers, and one of the funniest parts of the Avengers to me was when Nick Fury gets everybody together, and so Tony and Bruce Banner are working, right, are trying to figure out how the scepter of Loki works, how the Tesseract
Right.
works. And you saw Tony throughout a lot of the movies, he was like trying to goad Bruce
Oh,
into
that's
like,
right.
and like
Yeah.
and he was like, he would walk in, and he would just be looking at Bruce like, "No, you're not angry." And then Bruce was just looking at him like, "What are you doing? Like, do you realize what you're about to unleash?" You
Yeah,
know
he was
what I
trying to
mean?
make him Hawk out.
Yeah. So I feel like there's definitely some, maybe an homage, or maybe there's definitely a comparison there, where you have this very dangerous and a dangerous alter ego, and you have this person who wants to see it, come out.
That's
And
a
I'm
good
like,
catch. That's a really
yeah,
good catch.
yeah, I thought that was very funny. And so, I mean, I do, again, like, one of the things that I've liked about Falcon and the Winter Soldier is that they have not tried to erase who Bucky is. And
Mhm.
yes, while the Winter Soldier was cool, right? Like, he was this cool villain in Winter Soldier, but he did a lot of effed up ish. He
Mhm.
killed people. He didn't just kill bad guys. He killed a lot of innocent people, as we witnessed in episode 1 with that old, I think he was Asian American, and unfortunately one of the missions that Bucky executed, he killed all these people, and then that the old man's son was unfortunately an unwitting witness, and Bucky
Yeah.
had to kill him. And like we said, Bucky remembers everything. Like, yes, even though he went to Wakanda, what's interesting is that I thought that when he went to Wakanda and they put him on ice, I did think that they had, I thought maybe they had done a mind wipe of some sort, but
Like,
no.
erase those memories.
Yeah, so I think they deprogrammed him, but
Mhm.
he still very much remembers everything that he's done, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And just real quick, because I'll turn it back to you. What was interesting is when the three of them were on the plane and they're on their way to Madripoor, um, the notebook that we saw that Bucky had, which was sort of his
Mhm.
ledger, right? The names of the people that he wanted to make amends to while he was Winter Soldier, and the people that he had harmed, or their surviving families. We come to find out that that notebook was actually
Yeah.
Steve's notebook that we saw in Winter Soldier, where he was making a list of all the music and all of that. And I was like, oh, I didn't catch that. I did
Yeah.
not catch that was
Yeah, I didn't
Steve.
catch it till this episode either.
Yeah. What did you think of that?
I thought it was, I mean, it was kind of, it surprised me, but
Mhm.
it's kinda nice to know that Bucky got something from Steve,
Yes.
seeing that Sam got the shield, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah, he got something that was really important to Steve of his own, so I think that was really nice.
Yeah, because the other movie that I revisited too, of course, was Endgame. I was like, okay, if going for watching Avengers and then watching Endgame, I would highly recommend people watching it, because it really shows how a lot of these characters have evolved and grown. And that last scene, so that
Mhm.
the last scene in Endgame, when Steve, is going to put back the stones, and Bruce is like, okay, we'll see you in 5 seconds. And so he does it, it's old Steve that comes back on the bench. And when
Mhm.
Bucky and Sam go to speak to this older Steve Rogers, um, I noticed that when Steve handed Sam the shield, Sam looked to Bucky like, wait, is this for real? But it seemed to me like Bucky had a nod. It felt to me like, because Bucky looked at Steve and then he looked at Sam. I have this feeling that Steve had told Bucky already. Like, there was probably
Mm.
like some off-screen conversation of, I'm gonna be giving Sam. Number one, I think Steve had told Bucky, "I'm not coming back."
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think he had already told. That's why that goodbye, where he was like, "I'll see you soon." I think Steve had already told Bucky, "I'm gonna retire being Captain America," and I think he probably. I mean, in my imagination, I'm guessing he probably told Bucky, I'm going to give Sam the shield. He's going to be the next Captain America. I just need you to be there for him. You know what
Yeah,
I
because
mean?
it
Like,
did
to
seem like
mhm.
Bucky gave, like, a little nod of recognition when Steve did
Yes.
it, so I think you're
Yes.
right.
Yeah, and also, and I'm sure there was, maybe there was a discussion of like, well, this is, because Steve and Bucky are best friends. I'm sure maybe Steve was trying to explain to Bucky, this is why I'm giving Sam the shield and not
Mhm.
you, which brings us to episode 3 with the
Mhm.
decisions that Bucky made. And I'm like, see, and that's why you didn't get it. And that's why you're not Captain America. Because
Yeah, you're spot on.
I've had this discussion with, my brother. He's like a comic book purist, and he's very anti MCU. He's all, on DC and stuff. And I'm like, all right. But he was just like, I hate it. He was like, I don't understand why. We had this very passionate debate in our family group chat as to why Bucky is not the next Captain America. Because he was like, well, in the comic books, he was like, basically, he said Disney and Marvel are punks. He was like, they should have given Bucky the shield and whatever,
Wow.
and make it. And I was like, yeah, but I was like, listen, you're right. It is Disney.
Mhm.
I acknowledge that, and I'm like, listen, you can't have kids going to see a movie and all the things that Bucky has done to make him the next Captain America. He hasn't worked for it yet. That's my
Right.
personal opinion. I think this is what Falcon and the Winter Soldier is about. I'm not saying that Bucky's going to be the next Captain America, but it's really about a reckoning that yes, while he was brainwashed, this is a trope that we've seen on a lot of like movies and TV shows where it's like, oh, I was brainwashed, I was doing this, and then sort of the character's sort of given a clean slate, like, oh, it wasn't your fault. But Falcon and Winter Soldier is like they're staying on Bucky's neck, like, no.
All on his neck.
All on his neck, like, this is what you did. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And yeah, I was like, I'm not saying I would never want to see Bucky as Captain America. I think he could make a good Captain America. But again, when we saw this week's episode definitely shows me he is not ready to
Yeah,
take the
not
mantle.
anytime soon.
No, because Sam was the constant voice of reason. Every
Mhm.
time he or Zemo did something, and Sam was like, eh, and it was exactly what he said would happen. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So yes, while Sam did take sort of a backseat in this episode, I think it was really to illustrate why he would make the better Captain America.
I agree. I agree. I think
Yeah,
that's exactly why they did it. And I think
yeah.
next episode will be a heavy Sam episode.
I think so too. So let's talk about some of the other characters, some of the other storylines. So we know that Carly Morgenthau, uh, who who is the leader of the Red Hand, right, or the Flag Smashers? That's what they're
Yeah, the
called.
Flag
They're sort of
Smashers, yep.
this rebel group. We find out that I think that was her mother,
Mhm.
passes away in this episode. It seems that her mother had tuberculosis. And what I did like about the episode, I liked that opening scene where they had like that commercial with the Global Repatriation Council, or the GRC. And they're
Yeah.
basically an arm of the government, or whichever. It seems to be, it's global, where
Yeah.
they're the ones that are sort of overseeing the resettlement of people who had disappeared during the blip, right? And from
Mhm.
what we understand, when we watched episode 2, Carly is kind of upset because she was like, the people that remained behind who weren't blipped, we were the ones that had to refashion the world, so to speak. Like, we had to find our new, these new resources, this new normal. And then all these people came back, and it did seem like there was some sort of relocation or displacement, right?
Yeah, it feels like they've
Mm-hmm.
dedicated all the resources in the world to all the people returning, to the
Mm.
detriment of all the people that were still here.
Yes, yes. And it was interesting because I mean, I would have to again talk to the writers and maybe read some interviews, but Morgenthau is sort of like, it is a Jewish last name, is it not? Because she looks mixed race, so
I
she could
think
be.
so. I
Right?
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'd have to do some research. But what was interesting is this whole idea of displacement and relocation made me think about post World War II, right? Where you had
Mm.
the survivors of the
Holocaust.
Holocaust. And we have a very dirty history. HBO has a documentary about this, about how they were just ineffective, just even while World War II was going on and while the Holocaust camps were going on. We turned a blind eye. We were just like, oh, we don't have anything to do with that. And it really
Mhm.
wasn't until Pearl Harbor, and they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to kill the Nazis. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. But in history, we do find out that there were, Jewish, European Jews that were trying to come here to escape the oppression and the concentration camps. And the Americans were like, no, you can't come here.
Mm.
Like, that's something
Mhm.
that we don't like. I was watching this documentary, and I was like, my mouth was hanging. I was like, wow, what we've been taught, and what all these movies and media has taught us about our involvement in World War II is really not the entire story.
Not at all.
So yeah, so to find out that these people who are just horrors upon horrors and saying, well, we need a safe haven with you. And for the Americans to close their borders, so to speak, and be like, no, we're not going to do that. And then, that's when the creation of Israel, and they were like, okay, we're going to give you we're going to give you this land. Right.
Hmm.
And then that, of course, impacted the Palestinians who were like, I don't know. I mean, again, I think somebody who would be more well versed or more academic. I'll have to find somebody and see if they could come on. But I was getting shades of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just
Hmm.
throughout history of how this happens, about how people who have suffered, and rightly so, who do deserve resources, but those resources are usually at the cost of someone else.
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
it was like, wow. So I'd be really interested to see like what Carly's backstory as far as like her ethnicity or whatever. But it was just something I was keeping in the back of my mind. But we get to know a little bit more about her, as to her motivations, as to why she's doing this, and why they essentially were in Madripoor and they stole the super serum. I think they said there were 20 doses. So she
Hmm.
and her group took the 20 and they were like, we'll take it. So they gave themselves the serum in order for them to kind of do like these, to be able to steal the vaccines and get these resources and bring them into these settlement camps, right?
Right.
For people who were displaced. And I could be wrong, but I remember her when she was having this conversation with one of her other colleagues, Desmond Chaim. I think that's his name. He's super gorgeous, by the way. He looks like he's of Asian
That the
descent.
long haired man?
Yes, with
Yeah.
the long hair. Yeah.
Hmm.
And, I think Carly had said something to the effect of, not only were they taking the serums for themselves, I think their ultimate plan is to create to make more serum of the super soldier serum to
Oh,
give it to the kids.
I missed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's interesting to me, at least this is the one thing that I found really interesting, is like this redistribution, because the super soldier serum means so many things, right? It could
Hmm.
really be a metaphor for power and all of that. But I find it interesting that we are seeing people of color like Carly,
Hmm.
like the Desmond Chain character, or Chain character, who are people of color who are taking that super serum for themselves, but using it to empower other people of color and other people,
Mm.
oppressed minorities. I just thought that was, I was like, all right,
Yeah.
if y'all run with this storyline a little bit more, I think this could really be something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, me too.
Because up until this point, the only people we saw with the super soldier serum, Captain America, Bucky, white men, right? And then those
Right.
those those five soldiers that we saw in Civil War. I think one of them was black or whatever, but you know what I mean? But to see someone like
The
Carly,
ones
who's
in
this
Siberia?
in Siberia, yeah, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So to see someone like these two, and that group that Carly has, you'll notice that they're very diverse.
Mhm.
There's a lot of ethnicities and races there. So they're sort of like, well, we're going to take the super soldier serum, but they're not doing it for personal gain.
Right.
They're really doing it for like, um we got to take care of our people, because the government, pretty much the GRC, has abandoned them and hasn't
Mm,
really done much
exactly.
for them. Like, listen, it's 5 years after the blip and you still got people dying from tuberculosis. Like, what are y'all
Mm.
doing? You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
that just tells you how bad these living conditions are. Because tuberculosis, we know, is from close quarters, it's poor water, poor health. You know what I mean? It's all these other things. So we know that the people who have been displaced have not had it easy at all.
And it sounds spot on because I mean, I could easily see I mean, it is happening
Hmm.
today, right?
Hmm.
Like, I mean, that's basically what's gonna be happening with the vaccines and stuff like that. It's gonna go to the
Absolutely.
most powerful countries first.
Absolutely.
So, it's
Yeah.
very real.
I mean, did we not see? And it was so frustrating when, you saw all of these, like, a lot of these Republican um, politicians that had
Mm.
basically, they gaslighted us for almost a year, saying that this virus was a freaking hoax. And then once the vaccine was available, they were the first one posting pictures
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm taking the vaccine. And I'm like, but I thought you said that it wasn't real.
Right.
But you know what I
Yep.
mean? And every time I saw one of those pictures, infuriated me because it was like, not only did your rhetoric put your followers in danger because they believed you. They were like, well, if, Senator so and so or Congressman so and so said that this virus isn't real, so that's how we got the anti-maskers, right? They were like, well, they
Mhm.
ha ha ha, they said it's not real, right? And then
Yep.
people started dying and being really sick, and then these politicians are now the first ones in line, who, in my opinion, are taking resources from other people. I totally agree with you.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's like every Republican politician who said that it wasn't real and then got that shot. And I just kept thinking, wow, a single mother with 3 kids could have gotten that shot. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And essentially someone who's like a cashier or one of the managers of the supermarket or Target or, healthcare workers.
Somebody
You know
who
what I mean?
really needed it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they are bringing up some really important parts. I like the fact that it's not, oh, here's the blip, they came back and life as usual. I think what they're
Mhm.
showing is like, no, there are some real life, even though it was a very supernatural, out of this world occurrence, here are the real world consequences of what
Yep.
happens when billions of people come back after 5 years. So, but anyway, I wanted to get your thoughts. What do you think of the Carly character? And we see that she does something towards the end where I was like, oh, girl, no, why did you do that?
Yeah, I think it's, goes back to last week when we were talking about it, and I was like, "These aren't these aren't the bad guys."
Mhm,
This is just another, you know, it's just like another group that has a legit, I feel like anyway, they have a legit issue that they're trying to take care of.
mhm,
And, they're using the method that they feel is gonna help them the most, which is getting their hands on the super soldier serum,
right.
so they're strong enough to go and take the resources that they have been denied.
Mhm.
So I really like this character.
Yeah.
I want to see where they're gonna go with it. At the last thing she did in this episode kinda like makes it a lot more gray, at least for her,
Mhm.
because he didn't seem to agree with what she did.
Yeah. Cause up until this time, they might have like thrown a couple of soldiers around and,
Mhm.
whatever. But it's like, girl, he was like, cause she sets off
Yeah.
a bomb. We know that we see that they go to this place where they get more food and vaccine, medicine or whatever. And I understood her anger because she was like, this is so
Me too.
effed up. She was like, you have this stuff just sitting here for 6 months when there are people who could use that. And I
Mhm.
understand, and I totally understand that anger. But then when
Right.
she and the Desmond Chain character, get in the car, and she was like, "Put your seatbelt on," and I was like, "Uh oh, this ain't
Yeah.
good." Because he was like, "Well, aren't you gonna take your car?" She was like, "No, I'm gonna drive with you." And then she told him to put the seatbelt on, and then the car detonates. She put a bomb in there, and so the
Mhm.
bomb sets off a fire. It blows up the building that's in there, and we know that there were soldiers or whoever that they had tied up and left in there. And he's looking at her like, girl, there were people
Yeah.
in there. And she was like, well, that's the only that's the only language they
Yeah.
understand. And so it's like, listen, as black people, let's talk, Robert. Listen, we know that we've done the nonviolent movement, the nonviolent civil rights movement for how
Mhm.
many years, right? It was
Yeah,
always about
decades now.
decades,
Decades
right?
and decades.
Yeah. And then it's like, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, there are days, because right now we're living in real time where we're looking at the trial of the cop who murdered George Floyd, right?
Mhm.
Derek Chauvin. And I've only seen a couple of clips of the cross examination and the testimony, and it's making my blood pressure go up. And I was like, I can't,
Yeah.
and, people are afraid that this guy might walk, you know.
Mhm.
And we, at time after time after time, we've seen that where, black people are victims of police brutality or anti-blackness or just hate crimes, and usually the perpetrators walk off. You know what I
Right.
mean? Especially if they're cops. It was like, oh, we left Mike Brown's body in the street for 4 hours, and what? You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was just
Mhm.
sort of like just all these things, and sometimes it's just sort of like, I don't know. That has this peaceful, nonviolent. I was like, what has it really gotten us?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
do ask that sometimes, and I was just like, I forgot who the, I think her name is Kimberly Latrice Patrice Jones or whatever, and she said something which really occurred to me. This was when, at the height of the BLM protests this summer, and you had these white people who are so upset over property damage. They were like, "Oh, yeah, you blew out the windows, you damaged the Target and the CVS and stuff," and she was like, "F the property." You know what I mean?
Mhm.
She was like, "You should be that upset. You need to be more upset about the loss of life of black
Yeah.
and brown people. Like, where's the, you know what I mean, the outrage for that?" And she was like, and she said something that has always stuck with me. She was like, "You should be lucky." She was like, "White people," she was like, "You're lucky that we only want equality and not revenge, that we want justice and
Mhm.
not revenge." And I was like, "Girl."
Yeah. And like Carly said in this episode,
Hmm.
sometimes that's the only, it seems like the property damage is the only thing they understand. That's the only thing that gets to them.
Right. Right. And then it was, didn't MLK have a saying where he says riot is the language of the unheard, right?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, it's a much longer quote or whatever, but sometimes, and I think I appreciate that they're trying to push this grayness, right? Because for the most part in
Mhm.
the MCU, like towards the beginning, it was very evil, was very black and white.
Yeah,
And so I
definitely.
feel like with the Carly character, number one, I just love the fact that this woman who's leading this rebel group is a woman of color, as it should be. That
Mhm.
makes sense to me.
Yeah, I agree.
But she's sort of like, "F that." I'm not
Yeah.
Captain America. I might have the super soldier serum, but I ain't him. I'm not Steve
Yeah.
Rogers, okay?
She just lost her mom, so that seemed like that kinda, like,
Oh
put
yeah.
her over the edge, like, she's just tired of everything.
Absolutely. Because I'm sure when they went in there was probably medication that could have helped her mom.
Mhm.
Like that's
I
her,
didn't even think about that.
yeah, it's not like the woman had like a disease that was totally not with the proper care and food and nutrition that didn't need to happen. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? So yeah, so I'm fascinated by her character. I'm like, okay, girl, I see you. All right.
Mhm. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and then speaking of strong female characters, and I love that this episode that was definitely bringing more women into this. We are reintroduced to Sharon Carter, who again we
Mm.
had been introduced to in Winter Soldier. She was an agent of Shield. Also of note, she is Peggy Carter's the late Peggy Carter's niece. There was a little bit of romantic flirtation with her and Steve in Civil War because she basically risked her job when Steve and Bucky were arrested. She helped them break out, gave Steve back his shield, gave Sam back his wings, and for that, she is now a wanted criminal. So she had to run out of America. So she's in Madripoor. So they find her in Madripoor, and she explains that the reason why she's in Madripoor is because they don't believe in extradition. So as long as she's there, America can't touch her. Madripoor will not turn her over. And we find out that she's quite the resourceful young woman. Because since
Mhm.
she can't get a legal job, she is sort of like selling stolen artwork. Like she's doing quite
Yeah.
well for
She's
herself.
like an art thief now.
Yes, I'm like, girl, you were doing much better than when you were. I don't even know what Shield salaries look like. I'm assuming it's the government, but
Right.
she was she got the glow up. I'm gonna say
Big
that.
time glow up.
So what did you think of Sharon's appearance in this episode?
It was kind of like a revelation because she's kind of been like a character that like I never really paid a whole lot of attention to. She was like okay, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But like in this episode, she was like doing the damn thing. Like
Yes.
she's running things in Madripoor. She uh she just like it seems like she like capitalized on whatever connections she had while she was in Shield to like get started up here. And can I say that I was pretty excited to hear they were going to Madripoor since
Mm-hmm.
I kind of grew up a big X-Men fan and I'm pretty sure the very first time Madripoor showed up was in the New Mutants.
Oh, I did not know that. Tell us more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Back when Karma first left the New Mutants, they ended up having to track Karma down to Madripoor, and I'm pretty sure that's the first time it showed up in the MCU. And then right after that was the Wolverine miniseries. with
Oh wow.
Mariko and everything, and that I think almost the entirety of that took place in Madripoor.
Interesting. Interesting. Oh, that's I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm gonna have to look
Hmm.
that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna say this. Like the Madripoor scenes, hmm. I feel like I understood why, like, because it had to propel the storyline, right?
Hmm.
Um I kind of had mixed feelings about it because on one hand I was like, I understand it. Like they're trying to track down now that they've broke Zemo out of jail, and Zemo's like, I have a contact, and Magipore, it's this person called Selby. They can give us a jump or a lead on who has recreated the super serum that the members of the Red Hand had stolen, and
Hmm.
so. On one hand, I was like, it kind of worked, right? And then on the other hand, it was like my friend was like, it kind of felt like deleted scenes from Bad Boys 3. I was like,
Really?
I was like, oh no. Just sort of like the lighting and just like the club
Uh.
scenes and stuff. Like it kind of felt a little bad boyish, you know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
was just like, but I get, they were trying to create like this, it's like a world building, right? Like Madripoor is sort of like its own thing. Cause I think Sam, a little bit later says, New York has nothing on Madripoor. It's a
Yeah.
party town. It's a little lawless. It's, whatever. So I kind of get it. I mean, I think for me, it was just sort of like, because they do end up finding, because the person that they're looking for, they do find Selby is this mysterious person who kind of runs things in Madripoor. And just when they find Selby, Selby is about to tell them where the super serum, or who is creating the super serum. She's like, it's a this person named Dr. Wilfred Nagel. And just as they're about to get more information from her, somebody just kills her. It's like a sharpshooter. I have no idea. And then kills her.
Well, that was
Hmm.
when Sarah called Sam,
Right. And they
and
realize,
they're talking on the phone, and then once you know
mm,
Sarah says Sam's name, that's when they kill Shelby. That's when Shelby shot from
yeah. So we still don't
whoever.
know. So we still don't know who done that. And we still know that Selby works for a higher power. Is the person is called the power broker. So we still don't know
Hmm.
who the power broker is. I would maybe it's a more, I don't know if it's in the comics or it's canon. I'm very interested to know who this power broker is. I have a strong suspicion that whoever the power broker is probably somebody we know from the
The
MCU.
power, yeah, the power broker is definitely in the comics, and the power
Oh,
broker is
okay.
the one who gives John Walker in the comics the super serum.
Oh no! Oh, I already hate it.
So
I already
yeah,
hate it. Okay, so
yeah.
all right, so he's in the comics. Okay, good to know.
Hmm.
Good to know. And that's scary because we know that John Walker and Hoskins, what was
Hmm.
his Battlestar, are
Battlestar.
in at the end of the episode. They are in Madripoor, looking for Sam and
Yeah.
Bucky. So that's kind of scary. Oh God, I'm
Can we
terrified
talk
now.
about can we
Yes,
talk about Walker real quick for a
yes,
minute?
please, please.
In the beginning of the episode, when they're
Mm-hmm.
on that in Germany and they
Yes.
raid that building,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, and that guy spits in his face, and he yells, "Do you know who I am?" I
Yeah.
was like, okay, this is why they picked him to be Captain America, because this is what this America is. Like, this is the most American thing
Mm-hmm.
somebody could say.
Right. He's a bully. He is a
He is a
bully.
total bully, and that's
Mm-hmm.
basically the way this show is portraying America, and it's pretty
Yeah.
much true.
And did you catch this? Because what I find interesting, because remember we talked about this last week, like the fact that Walker and Hoskins are sort of like this mirror reflection of Steve and Sam, right? As like this white
Hmm.
superhero with this kind of like BFF sidekick, right?
Right.
But we're already seeing static in the Hoskin and Walker relationship, and I'm here
Hmm.
for it because what's interesting is that when they raid that place to get information on Carly, and so John is talking to the guy is speaking back to him in German or some other language, and he calls Hoskins over. He was like, I need a translator. And so Hoskins asks him, well, where can we, where's Carly or whatever. Now the guy said something really insulting. Like he was basically like F John Walker or whatever, like F
Hmm.
y'all. But then when Hoskins translated it to Walker, he gave him a very neutered translation.
R-
Did you notice that?
right. Yeah, I did. I did.
It was almost like Hoskins was protecting that guy. Like he wasn't going to talk. He was just like he doesn't know where he is. That's not what the
Yeah.
guy said. The guy was like, "F you."
Like he knew Walker would
Mm-hmm.
snap if he told him the
Yes.
real thing.
Absolutely. And then the scene when they walk outside and Hoskins is like, but listen, these guys are just stealing medicine and vaccines. I mean, so Hoskins is already like a question mark.
Mm,
Like number one, I think the way that Walker responded to that guy, I think has Hoskins at least on yellow alert. Like,
yeah,
bruh.
I agree.
Like for me, it was sort of like the black cop and his white partner, right?
Hmm.
Because it's policing. Let's call it what it is. That's what the GRC is, and it's sort of like that black cop who sees his white partner roughing up people, and is like, should I say something? Shouldn't I say something? And because you can see a look of disapproval on Hoskins' face,
Yeah.
like you didn't. Because I'm thinking to myself, if this was Steve Rogers and somebody had spit in Steve's face, Steve wouldn't have come at him like that. Steve would have been like,
No.
you know what? All right, I'm gonna walk away from here.
Hmm.
Walker, on the other hand, was like, I'm about to fuck you up. Like, I think if there were no people there, I think Walker would have worked that guy over. That's what I
He
think.
would have. He
Yeah.
would have. And remember in the second
Mm-hmm.
episode and that
Yeah.
beginning in the football locker room
Mm-hmm.
and Hoskins said, "You can't punch your way out of everything." So this ain't the first time he's seen him do
Woo!
stuff like this. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. So Hoskins, no, and
He's
I
seen this
like,
before.
yeah, I'm now very interested in Hoskins because I thought he was just gonna be like, whatever. But it seems that Hoskins definitely has his own mind and has his
Hmm.
own opinions. And I would not be surprised. I mean, we have 3 more episodes left. I would not be surprised that if by the end of the show, Hoskins and Walker's relationship is fractured. Like
I agree.
I would not be surprised if Hoskins moves over to the other side with
Yeah, I
Bucky and
agree.
Sam. Because I think as things escalate, and based on what you're saying, that the power broker does give Walker the super serum, because I could totally see Walker doing that shit. Now that he's a magic
Oh,
prince.
you know he would.
Like he was like, oh, I need to level up, and if I need to fight these guys, if I need to fight the Red Hand, I've got to be just like them. I have a feeling that if they follow that storyline that you're saying, that Power Broker gives Walker access to super serum surgery, Walker's going to be, we already don't even like him now. He's going to be insufferable.
He's
And
gonna be a problem.
he's
He
going to
is
be a
gonna be a
problem.
problem.
And I think that is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back between him and Hoskins' friendship.
Hmm.
I like the actor who plays Hoskins, by the way. I think he's cool. But I like that he's already like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling this. And I think he is, the fact that he kind of stood up for the Red Hand, it was just kind of like, but are they really villains? Like what are we really doing here? Like I feel like
Hmm.
that is Hoskins. And I think that goes to what, like our first conversation when you said, when you served in the military and after 20 years and looking back at your service, while you were proud you served your country, but now as you get older, you're kind of questioning some of the things
Yeah.
that happened. And I think this is what's happened. Like he's just going to be like on a fast track. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hoskins. Yeah.
Yeah, he's on an accelerated rate that you were, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because he's just sort of like, and I think the more that as they get deeper into this mystery, I think Hoskins is going to be like, no, I don't think these people are evil. They're just trying to survive. Like
And I
that's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if Hoskins will find out about Bradley too, the way Sam did. I wonder if he's gonna find that out.
Oh, wow. You know what? I just realized when they were showing, how they showed the scenes from the last episode, from
Mhm.
episode 2, and I missed this, and I wanted to ask you about this. This was the scene when um John Walker and Hoskins first met Sam and Bucky when they were having the fight with the Red Hand on the highway, and then that's when they offered them the ride. After the fight, that's when they offered Sam and Bucky to ride in the back of the truck with them, and they were having a
Right.
conversation. And then Walker said something, and I was like, "How the frick did I miss this?" In the clip, he said this in episode 2. He said something about the super serum or the shield, where he was like, "Yeah, it's something about a complicated history or something like that. Like you don't really know the whole story." And I'm like, John Walker must know about Isaiah Bradley.
Oh, crap.
Girl,
I
listen,
missed that too.
I'm gonna go back. Listeners, I'm gonna go back and what I might do is find that clip and put it in our recap
Go
of
back and
episode 4.
confirm it.
But he definitely said something to the effect of like, it's not, basically the legacy of the Shield or Captain America is not what you think or whatever. And I'm like, he must have known, because right after, that's when Bucky was like, "Oh, I need to take you to go see Isaiah Bradley." So I'm
Mm.
wondering if
See,
Bucky
that would
picked,
make sense.
yeah, if like that was like a ding ding ding, like Bucky was like, "Oh, I know who you're talking about. Oh, let me take
Mhm.
Salmon." So if John Walker, and I wouldn't be surprised if they gave Walker access to that information
I
when
wouldn't
they made
either.
him.
I wouldn't
Wow.
either.
And then and let's talk about the fact that he knew about that and he still took the shield. So what
Mm.
does that so what does that say about him? Like, okay,
It says everything we already knew, right?
right? Like, you know the legacy is dirty, and you took the shield anyway. And you were like, all right, never mind these black people. You know what I mean? Which leads
Mhm.
us to the. So let's move a little bit forward. So we know that they end up finding Dr. Wilfred Nagel. He is the one who had recreated the serum. We understand that when they find him, Sharon gets some intel and is able to bring them to Wilfred Nagel, and he says that basically he was able to recreate the serum because he had been given some samples from
Mhm.
a test subject, which we know is Isaiah Bradley. And I was like, oh, so you just gonna talk about him like that? All right. Because Sam says that later in the episode. He was like, I hated the fact that he just talked about him like he wasn't even like a human being. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess from the samples that they took from Bradley, they recreated it. And of course, Nagel was all on some, oh, but mine is better, right? Because you don't need a machine and you don't need this. It's going to be refined. You don't need to be buff. You know what I mean? And then we find out that he did make 20 samples of it. And that's when Carly, I love her even more now. She busted into his lab and stole the samples. You know what I'm saying? And so they were like,
Mhm.
well, do you have any more? And he says no, which I think is a lie. I think he did. I think he does have
I do too because they kept
more.
on focusing on some test tubes in his
Yes.
lab,
Hmm.
remember?
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gave the power broker. All he needs is just one to give to the power broker. Which, if, like you said, if your theory holds up and he gives it to John Walker, that's going to be a problem. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But yeah. So here's the thing about the Wilfred Nagel. I will say this. Now he is a character in the comics. They did kind of retcon him for this version of the MCU, which, let me be clear. I don't have a problem with retconning at all, because sometimes,
Mhm.
a comic book character may be problematic, or the storyline may not translate as well to the screen, to a screenplay. Like with Civil War. Civil War is nothing like the comic book, not real. I mean, it has threads of it, but it's very, very different, which I actually
Yeah.
think was kind of cool. I actually thought it had a more personal touch to it. So I don't have a problem with retconning. The thing with Wilfred Nagel, according to comic book canon, he was introduced in Red, White, and Black, The Truth, the Isaiah Bradley comic. He was actually a contemporary of Dr. Erskine's. So he is much older than that. Like in the comic book, he was the one who recreated the super serum that they tested on the 300 black soldiers, including Isaiah Bradley.
Mhm.
And like I said in the last episode, those 300 soldiers, they did not volunteer. They were forcibly taken to be experimented on, right? And
Right.
yeah, and out of those 300, only five survived, and then the other four, just through a series of really bad things, Isaiah Bradley ended up being the only one who was the survivor. And not to mention the fact that the military, had told their families, these 300 soldiers, that they're told their families that they had died in battle
Mhm.
in order, whatever. So I do. I mean, I was like, well, could they really have? Because he wouldn't be alive today. Let's put it that way. If Nagel
Yeah,
wasn't,
right, that's
you know what I
true.
mean. But I do feel like, and we said this last week, this just begs that we have to revisit the Isaiah Bradley story, because it is
Yeah.
it is so much worse. Like what we saw in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. If you had never read the comic books and you're just following the storyline, you're like, oh, Isaiah Bradley. Oh yeah, that's messed up. It's so much. It's so much more messier than that. And Wilfred Nagel is actually more nefarious than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Mm,
one of these last 3 episodes, we're gonna get some of this
right.
because, they, was it Carl Lumley, the actor?
Yes. Hmm.
Like, they made him up to be way older than he really is.
Yeah, he doesn't
So
look
I
like
feel
that.
like
Mhm.
yeah, so I feel like in one of these last 3 episodes, we're gonna get more of the Isaiah Bradley story. I don't know if we'll get a whole episode, but I feel like
Hmm.
we're gonna get a
Yeah,
chunk, maybe in a flashback or something,
right.
since he doesn't actually look that old.
Yeah, because the pitfall that I don't want Falcon and the Winter Soldier to fall into is that I don't want them to fall into that trope of using black trauma and black
Mhm.
death to propel a storyline, right?
I
Because
agree.
there is sort of a history in the MCU of that, and we saw that in Civil War, where in the beginning, where Wanda accidentally blew up that building and killed those accidentally killed the Wakandan volunteers that were there. They were there
Mhm.
on a mission of mercy, so to speak. These were like doctors and nurses or whatever, and they were murdered, and that propelled a certain storyline. And then also in Civil War, there was a lot of Black death in Civil War. Let's talk about that. We had the
Mhm.
Wakandan um, volunteers; they were killed. All right. Then, well, not all right. And then we saw, we find out that during the Sokovian battle and from Civil War, this young Black man who was, I forget what his name was, Charlie, I think, Alfred Woodard's son. Alfred Woodard's performance was so beautiful in that.
Right,
When she met
right.
Tony by the thing, and that his death is actually what motivates Tony to sign the Sokovia Awards. Which, let me tell you something, I actually agreed with that. Tony was
Mhm.
like, listen, we gotta stop these shenanigans right now, all right? Like, we're killing people, we're killing innocent people, this is not cool, or whatever. And then we get King T'Chaka, who was murdered. So that's a lot of black bodies
It is.
for
It is.
the MCU, which is just now bringing black people. I was like, damn. I mean, I can't say it's a balance. We were introduced to Black Panther and the Doras or whatever, which was cool. But I'm just saying, like, I just really need them to focus and be careful that this doesn't become like a recurring plot point, right?
Mhm.
Like where you use black suffering, like with Isaiah, to kind of propel the storyline. Like I don't mind the fact that Sam found out about Isaiah Bradley, because like we said in the first podcast, that is actually going to impact his decision on whether he wants to take the shield or not, because that's another.
Absolutely.
And I want to talk to you about that, because on the flight back from Madripoor, Bucky and Sam have this very interesting conversation, because Sam is pissed. And remember, we were talking about that. I was like, I really need to see, man. I need them to allow. That's the other thing I want to see in Falcon and Winter Soldier, is that I need them to make space for Sam's
Right.
rage. Like Black Rage is, you want to do Black Pain, okay, but Black Rage needs to be part of the equation too. Like there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with Sam being upset. And he was upset. He was like, yo, this dude created this super serum and just used this black man as a guinea pig. Like, I'm not feeling that. Bucky's like,
Mhm.
well, the shield, like Bucky's all defending, the Captain America legacy. And I was just waiting for Sam to be like, fuck Captain America, fuck that legacy. But I think we're getting there. I
Yeah,
think,
I do too. I do. I feel like one of these last 3 episodes, we're gonna get a focus
yeah.
on that whole Isaac. I mean, just the fact that
Mhm.
in the, at the beginning of this episode when they were showing, the previously on, they focused on that. I feel like they're gonna, you know, focus on it in an episode in one of the last 3.
Right, right. Because like I understand, like it has to be, there's been this conversation online about, black pain and black trauma in movies and television, and people are like, I don't want to see that anymore. I just want to see black joy. And absolutely, I don't have a problem with it, but I was like, but at the same time, like I do feel that some of the studios and some filmmakers are capitalizing. I think there's a difference between showing it and exploiting it.
Mhm.
And when you're
Yeah.
exploiting it just for exploitation's sake, where you're just trying to, for a shock value, that's different. And so that's why I'm like, I really, for the next 3 episodes, I hope that they're not going to veer in that direction. But also at the same time, I felt like we do need to talk about Isaiah Bradley. Like I think it would,
Yeah, we
like
do.
like if we followed that argument that people had, like I don't want to see black pain and black trauma. Well, Isaiah Bradley's story was very much needed to be, it very much needed to be introduced into the MCU. It really, really did. And so
Mhm.
I just feel like as long as it's not just a plot point, but actually, and we have said this, that there needs to be sort of like a revisitation of this storyline to humanize Isaiah, not to just see him as a victim, but
Yeah.
to actually see, like I said, a flashback or a series, or a movie where this man was married, like he had a loving family, he came from Harlem, had a beautiful wife, and then was called to service because he wanted to serve his country, and he was given the ultimate betrayal.
Mhm.
And so I feel like we need to bring back Isaiah Bradley. I agree with you, because we need to hear more from him, from his
Yes.
point of view, and not other people talking for him, but like, not just, oh, I spent 30 years in jail. Well, what was that like? Like,
Yeah.
in isolation? Like, I can't even imagine what that's like. And I don't think they mentioned it on the show, but in the comic book, when he was arrested, it was literally because he had borrowed the Captain America costume
Mhm.
and shield, and for that they were like, that's treason, and just threw him
Yeah.
away. So yeah, I do feel like there needs to be, and I think the other thing that will definitely help, besides bringing back Carl Lumbly and having him tell his story, and showing his humanity, is also, I think, like you said, a lot of people are talking about Eli Bradley,
Mhm.
Isaiah Bradley, the young man who answers the door in episode 2. That legacy needs to continue. I think Eli Bradley, if they plan on forming Young Avengers, um, that brings some hope, right? And a way to,
Yeah.
not to rectify, but just in a way to just be like, these are this is how blackness is looking in the MCU right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And where
Yeah, I agree.
it can be free of trauma and pain or whatever. Because I mean, I've read a little bit about the Eli Bradley character. He seems super cool, and the actors that they picked, he's so cute. I found his
Mhm.
IG page, and I was like, I really want to see him. I want to see him come
Yeah.
back. So yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
he fits the character perfect, so I hope I'm pretty sure they wouldn't put him in there for no reason.
right. Well, we know that about the MCU. They never do anything gratuitously.
Mhm. They're
um,
peppering these shows with all these little seeds.
Yeah. So for the last 3 minutes, and we're at 57 minutes, I want to talk about that last cameo appearance. Holy shit. That made up for I was just like, I mean, it was not that it was a bad episode. I mean, I had some question marks and just like,
Right.
some things I would have done different. But that made up for it, because
I did not expect that at all.
no, at all. I mean, listen, you and I have been following the news, the casting news. That was like super, super, super secret. And I think I follow Florence Kasumba on Twitter or Instagram or something. I ain't hear nothing from her. But
That's amazing.
yeah, from what I understand, I think they shot those scenes because they shot overseas, a lot of the episodes or whatever. So I guess it was easier to keep it a secret. But I appreciated that. Number one, the return of the door, frickin' Milaje. We see
Mhm.
Ao, who's played by Florence Kasumba. We had been introduced to her in Civil War. You see how everything keeps circling back to Civil War here?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I love. And so she was T'Challa's bodyguard, and she was the one that told, when Black Widow stood in her way, she was like, move or you will be moved. And I was like, I'm mad that we
Mhm.
never got to see that fight, because I wanted to see it. Um,
She's good at these end of thing cameos.
yes, she is, honey. She's gorgeous, just statuesque, just gorgeous. And so I'm glad that that is happening, because if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, right, we're talking about the importance of blackness on the show. Yes, Mr. Zemo, Baron Zemo, like he's out here acting like Bruce Wayne, like living it up. And it's like, no, sir, you killed the king of Wakanda. You really, really think that your wealth and your resources are going to protect you? I don't think so, buddy.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that was wild. Like as soon as he like bent down and I saw the Kimoyo bead, I was
Oh,
like,
that's what it
"What?"
was.
Yeah, yeah, it's those
Oh,
beads, remember that?
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, as soon as he picked that up, I was like, "Oh," I was like, "What is about to go down here?" But it makes sense.
Of
Like
course.
they would track him down as soon as he popped up again.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure they had contacts at the jail. I mean, for him to escape,
Mhm.
that made new. And like you said, we know that Wakandans have war dogs. They have people out there as witnessed by Lupita's character.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They have eyes and ears everywhere. So of course they want to keep an eye on Zemo. So I think Zemo is really feeling like, I'm good.
He's feeling himself so hard. He
He's
is really
feeling,
feeling
oh,
himself.
it's about to be a whole situation, because with Io's appearance, the question is, who else is showing? Are we going to see
Mhm.
Shuri? Are we going to see, I mean, is not Lupita, Danae Guerrero's character,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okoye.
Oh my
Okoye, is
goodness.
she going to show
Okoye.
up? I just want a whole legion
Give
of
it up, give
Dora.
them all to me.
Give them all to me.
It makes me think of that series that you said you wanted with the Dora Milaje.
Yes. And who's to say? I
Yeah.
mean, and that's the great thing about Marvel, is that, like, even these, like with WandaVision, at least two, three different projects are all spinning from that, right? We've got
Mhm.
Monica Rambeau. Plus, we have
Mhm.
Wanda, who's going to be in Doctor Strange 2. And then it also set up Secret Invasion with Nick Fury. Although we did not see him, we saw the scrub. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yep.
WandaVision, like, Kevin Feige, man, I was like, can I just intern for you for like free? Like, I
Mm.
would just do your coffee runs and everything, because they are very, very strategic. Nothing, it's
They
like you
really
said,
are.
nothing is gratuitous with them at all. Well, remember, they had announced that they are doing a Wakandan series for Disney Plus,
Yep, they
right?
are. Yep.
So I'm sure they were probably planning that already. They were like, oh, we're just telling you, but we probably,
Let's
so
go. I'm ready.
who's to say that whatever storyline with the Dora that happened in Falcon and the Winter Soldier will now set the will set the foundation for this Dora series, or this Wakanda series. I mean, it made me, like, I was happy, and then it also made me sad, because then it's like anything related to Black Panther is like, it's still a pain for a
Yeah.
lot of us, because then you're reminded, because like when I watched Endgame, I think
Sad.
when I told you I was watching Endgame the other day, and the funeral scene for Tony, it was like this great scene where you're seeing like the continuation of the Avengers, and you saw, like, whatever, and then the camera stopped on T'Challa,
Mhm.
Okoye, and Letitia, and what's his little sister's name? Oh my God, I'm
Shuri.
Shuri,
Shuri.
and then it just, oh man, I started crying, because I was like, oh my God, he only got to do one Black Panther movie. Like, it was so
Mhm.
surreal. Like, he was acting at a scene at a funeral, and then he would end up dying himself a couple of years after. And that's a pain, I think, for a lot of people who are Black Panther fans. We've
Yeah.
talked about this. Like, a lot of people had been debating where should they recast T'Challa or not. I think Marvel made the right decision not to. It's too soon, it's too fresh, and especially in the middle of the pandemic, like, we're in perpetual grief right now. And I
Yeah.
think, we didn't want to send the message that Black people are replaceable, you know what I mean? So I get it. And recently we just saw an interview with uh Ryan Coogler, the director and co-writer of Black
Mhm.
Panther. He was on a podcast with Jamel Hill, and it just made me cry. He was like, it is incredibly difficult, because he had finished the script already. And
Yeah, I
then,
can't imagine how hard that
yeah,
was.
so it's just like, and he had a kinship. Like, it wasn't just a professional working relationship, but really like a brotherhood with Chadwick. And then it's
Mhm.
like, I gotta rewrite this, like, everything. You know what I mean? And my heart
Yeah.
just hurts for him. I can't imagine how hard that is. But
Yeah.
I was glad to see Io. And I think, and this is why I say that it was so smart for Ryan Coogler. Not that he could have ever known what was going to happen to Chadwick Boseman. This is why it was so. It's actually bearing fruit in the fact that Ryan invested in so much in the female characters of
Mm.
Black Panther, because in a way they
Mhm.
are going to carry on that legacy for Chadwick. And
Absolutely.
Chadwick was very much, a champion for women, an ally to women. I think I read somewhere where I think he did the movie, was it 21 Bridges or some movie, where he found out that his female co-star was getting paid less. And he was
Yeah,
like,
that was
no,
21 Bridges.
yes. And he was like, no, you're going to pay her the same amount of money. You
Yep.
know what I mean? And everything that I've ever seen in interviews with Chadwick, he was very much an ally to women. He was a supporter of Kamala Harris. One of the last pictures on his social media was a picture of him and Kamala. So I think I think wherever Chadwick is, I think he's really happy that we have like these incredibly strong, beautiful Black women of the Black Panther franchise that are going to carry on his legacy in a way. So
I
I'm
agree.
trying not to cry. I was just like, oh my
I
God, it's
agree.
so sad. But thank you so much, Robert, for coming back. We'll be back for episode 4. You'll be back, right?
Definitely. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. Oh my God. Dora, more Dora stuff in episode 4. I cannot wait. Cannot wait. So thank you, listeners, for listening to another episode of the Spectrum Lounge. We will be back next Friday to discuss episode 4 of Falcon and the Winter Soldiers. See you on the other side.